Hello everyone, thank you for joining me. Welcome to day 7 of my 12 days of Crafty Christmas. Today I'm going to be creating a card with the Sparkling Snowflakes stamp set. I've already mounted my stamps onto clear acrylic blocks ready to go. I've also cut my cardstock, so I've got a basic white card base, a standard size card base, a fresh freezer panel, and this is 1/2 centimetre shorter in both directions to give me a nice narrow white border around it, and then a white panel that's going to go on the front there. Again, that's 1/2 centimetre shorter in both directions to give me that nice narrow border. So we're going to be stamping on the front white panel. So my 3 colours today is Balmy Blue, Fresh Freesia and Boho Blue. I'm actually just going to grab a scrap piece of paper because I'm going to be stamping off the edge. So I've got my Stamp and Pierce mat because they are photopolymer stamps. So the snowflakes are it's a 2-step stamping. So you have the solid image of the snowflake, and then another stamp that you put over the top that gives you that lovely detail. So I'm going to start with the largest snowflake, and I'm going to use Boho Blue for that, just to ink up my stamp. And then I'm going to start off quite central, and then I'm going to stamp again. We'll have a partial over here, and then over here we'll have just a thin bit like that. Then I'm going to bring in my medium stamp, and I'm going to use the Fresh Freesia ink for that. So I'll have a whole snowflake there, and then most of a snowflake up there, and then maybe just a little. No, I'll leave it there for a second. And then in the Balmy Blue, the smallest snowflake, and we'll put a full one there, and a nearly full one up there, and then I think actually I'm going to stop there. Okay, so I'm going to give that a second to dry off. So I've left quite a big gap here. That's on purpose. I've left that to be where I'm going to stamp my sentiment. So because I'm going to be heat embossing the detailed images, I'm just letting that ink dry. And then I'm going to bring in my embossing buddy, my powder tool, whatever it is that you'd like to call it. And I'm just going to dust over my project. This helps to prevent the embossing powder sticking in places that I don't want it. And then I'm going to be using my Versamark ink pad. This is a watermark stamp pad. It's really sticky ink, so it will stay wet for a little while, which gives you that time to then get your embossing powder on and then get that heat set. So I'm going to start with the largest detailed snowflake. Just ink that up really well, and then I'm going to pop it down over the top of my outline. I'm going to do that for all 3 of my large snowflake images. And I'm going to bring in the medium one. This is going to go over my Fresh Freesia. And then this one here up at the top, and then our little snowflake. And these are so pretty. The detail on them is lovely. And I think the heat embossing really makes them pop. There we go. So I've done all of my Versamark. And I'm going to bring in my trusty tray I use when I'm heat embossing. This just catches all of the embossing powder, means that I can sprinkle it back into the pot for next time. So just sprinkling the embossing powder over my project, give it a little wiggle, make sure that it's hit all of the areas that I want it to, give it a little tap, and then I'm going to scoop that powder back into the little pot, and I have a little inexpensive makeup brush to help with that as well. So I'm minimising the amount of embossing powder that I lose each time. And then pop that back in there because I'm going to be heat embossing my sentiment as well, but I'm going to be using a different colour of embossing powder for that. So once I'm happy that my tray is nice and clean, I've got all of that embossing powder out of the way. I'm then going to stamp my sentiment. So I'm going to use the Let It Snow sentiment that's from the same stamp set. So I'm going to ink that in my Versamark ink. I'm going to pop it in this gap over here, like so, and then I'm going to sprinkle that with black embossing powder. Now I'm going to be ever so careful because I don't want my black embossing powder to take over from the silver, and I think I did a pretty good job with that then. Then I'm going to heat up my heat tool, get that nice and hot, and try and keep it away from the speaker so it's not too noisy for you. So one of the tips for when you're heat embossing, you'll find sometimes that the cardstock has a tendency to kind of curl in one direction or the other, and a good way to combat that is to add some heat to the underside of your project as well. So you'll see here in a minute. Just wait for that to be nice and hot. Just waiting for that to get nice and hot. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to heat the underside of my project first, and you'll see as I add the heat it does start to curl the cardstock. Then when I add heat then to the front, that curl evens out. So just adding heat to both sides of your project can really make a difference. So, I love heat embossing, it always feels like magic. So I'm just going to heat that until all of that embossing powder is nice and smooth and melted. So just take a little bit of time, but I always think the end result is so worth it. So you always want to keep it moving over your project, because you can overheat it. And if you overheat it, it just doesn't look quite as nice. That's on the snowflakes, and then I'm going to knock and carefully do my sentiment. Nice and smooth and melted. There we go. And then I'm going to attach my layers together. So I'm going to use Tombow to attach my front panel to my Fresh Freesia panel, and then I'm going to use dimensionals to pop up those two layers. So on with my Tombow. The nice thing about using liquid glue is it gives you that little bit of wiggle room so that you can adjust if you need to get that nice even border all the way around. So just a little wiggle. And then I'm going to pop some dimensionals on the back of my project. And I'm going to use quite a few because this will likely be reaching its recipient through the postal service. So I'd quite like for some of that dimension to still be there when it arrives. And then we'll take the backs off. Oops. one didn't want to come off. Last one, there we go. And then I'm going to pop that down onto our card base. And then if you wanted a little bit of extra sparkle, you could add some embellishments, and I think I might, just to those snowflake centres, so I've put a large one in the centre of that large snowflake, a medium one on the medium snowflake, and then a diddy little small one in that small snowflake. And then I'm going to do the same for the others. So all of my snowflakes that have centres showing will have a little embellishment in the centre, just to really make it sparkle. And there we have it. That is our project for today. So thank you so much for joining me. I do hope that you'll come back and join me again for day 8. Thanks again. Take care. Bye.